Hello, hello. My name is Linda, also known as Tortajala around the internet, and I love creative journaling and all things stationery. So today I want to share a very casual video with you as I bought a whole bunch of brown or brownish ink samples from FountainFeder in Germany, and I'm going to swatch them all. So here in Europe, I feel like we have less shops that actually offer samples for sale. So when I found out that this shop, FountainFeder, existed, I was super happy and I wanted to try it out immediately. Since there's like shipping costs, I went ahead and picked a color and decided to get like a whole bunch of inks in that family. And I chose brown because that is the color family that I am currently just experimenting with and trying to find a color for. When you get like a sample, I think these are 2 milliliters. You could probably get more as well, but that's really enough to fill your pens like at least twice, right? If you have regular sized pens, or like a TWSBI Eco, if you were to like fully fill it, I think it's 2 milliliters. But I think samples are a great way to like try out a color because even as a newbie, I know that even if you check out the online images and do your research and watch videos and comparisons, it's never really the same as the actual experience of seeing the ink for yourself, in your journals, in your paper, with your pens. There's always this aspect of how an ink looks as a swatch as well, which varies wildly depending on how you swatch your inks, right? Do you use a brush? Do you use, a paper bag? Do you use, um, some other tool? A lot of people out there, like they swatch their inks very beautifully and very large in size so that you can see the variations of the ink. But of course, when you write with the ink, you aren't usually going to get all of that variation because, it's a fine line that you're writing with. And it's a very personal and like different experience when you actually use the ink in like your pen, in your pages, in your journaling, like just the way that you would use it day to day. And I am someone who likes variety. So even though it makes sense that you would have like maybe a couple tried and true colors so that you would buy bottles, I'm realizing that even with just a little bit of experience, taste can change. So you might get stuck with like a huge bottle if your tastes change and you don't feel inclined to use that ink anymore, which is not a great feeling. That is actually the situation that I'm in right now. Sort of currently searching for a brown ink because it is a color that I use a lot of. So it's not that I don't want a bottle, but what happened is I have a big bottle of Diamine Golden Brown, and it was one of the inks that I just use pretty often, like it's a default. I like always have it inked somewhere, basically. But without getting into the details, I now associate that color with poop. So yeah, I don't like it as much as I thought I did before. Tastes change, opinions change, right? So I really need to remind myself to like not buy a bottle if I'm not like just, I don't know, really, really sure that I'm going to love it forever. Especially if it's a standard ink that you can always buy, right? I sort of like didn't realize this before, but of course there are many inks that are like always available. You don't have to stress out that it's, gonna sell out. And you will probably receive information if it gets, um, discontinued or something anyways. And even for those that are like limited colors and things like that, ultimately there's always going to be a new release, right? There's always going to be new colors introduced like every year, every season. So no doubt we're not going to be like bored or, run out of fountain pen inks to try. I don't think so. I don't know. So hopefully I've learned the lesson and I will be a bit smarter about ink buying in the future. But right now I am sort of like just searching for that standard brown that I want to use. And I don't know. Maybe it's okay to just keep getting samples and just keep switching it around, and using different ones. I don't know. But what I did was basically go to the FountainFeder website and just look through all of their brownish colors that they had on sale as samples, and I ordered everything that interested me. So they're mostly in the brown family or like sort of like dirty brown. But some are sort of like greenish or yellowish as well, just whatever I wanted to get. Since I was paying for shipping anyways, I should get like the, maximum amount. But they're definitely all colors that I'm interested in. So I definitely want to ink them all up and write like a pen dry for each color so that I can really get a feel for like, do I like it or not? There are so many, brands of ink out there and I don't know anything about them. I don't have the experience. So this is all like an exploratory stage for me. Oh, by the way, if you just want to see the ink colors swatched, I'm going to put it in the timestamp. So you can jump to the end if that's all you want to see. I will show all the inks swatched and dried at the end. But basically, I'm trying to go through this like I'll speed things up a little bit because I'm really slow at swatching my inks. And since I'm in this A6 notebook, I feel like there's limited space. So I can only swatch a few inks at a time and I have to wait for them to dry before I go to the next page. So this was like multiple sessions to swatch so many inks because I bought so many samples. And I definitely don't have like the right tools or like a proper system down pat for like swatching inks. I'm using like a random plastic bottle top to try and make the circles, but I don't think it's really like a flat top, so it's not really a good option, honestly. And I have the Kakamori brass nib, but to be honest, like I've had it for a long time, like 9 months, but I don't really like it. And I think part of it is just user error because personally, like I just don't jive with it very well when it comes to writing. I think that it makes interesting lines and all that. I just don't like writing words with it. Like I'm really annoyed by it. It's such a fancy tool, yet I don't like it. But I didn't buy it, by the way. I don't think I ever would have bought this myself because it's really pricey, but I want it in a giveaway, and that's why I have it. But I sort of feel bad that I don't like it because it's such a fancy tool. Maybe I'm just not using it the right way, and I have cleaned it extensively to make sure that it's not a problem of like the little channels or like canals being dirty or something. I just think that when you write with it, it gets blobby, especially if you write small. Sometimes just like too much ink comes out, and other times you like nothing comes out, and it makes me want to push harder on the page just by default, even though I know that's not what you're supposed to do because you're supposed to rotate to reach the other, parts where ink might be. I don't know. It's just frustrating to me. And I have been using it for so long already. So it's sort of like, maybe it's just not for me, personally. And it makes me wonder though, why do people not just use a fountain pen? Um, to test out new inks, meaning like a fountain pen that's not inked up, like you dip it, so that you could use it to write a paragraph or so. I feel like, wouldn't that be a better representation of like how you would use the ink? Or do we not do that because like the feed of the fountain pen like soaks up a lot of ink, so you're like wasting ink if you do that? I don't know. Let me know down in the comments if you have thoughts. Maybe I'm just missing something totally obvious, but I was thinking like, why don't I just use a fountain pen that is not inked up as like my swatching pen, if that makes sense. um or maybe it doesn't make sense because you would have to wash it so much and you wouldn't be able to completely dry it out, and then you would get like contamination or like water in your ink. Maybe that's why. But I guess it would work if you're not like swatching 1,000 inks all the time. If you literally um, had more self control and maybe just bought like one new ink and then you're just trying one new ink. I don't know. I do feel that when you are swatching fountain pen inks, there's sort of like different types of swatching for different types of purposes. Let me know if that's how you like think about it. In my mind, I feel like there's the practical side of swatching inks so that you have it on like record or a log or like swatch cards or something, and you're using it to refer to the ink color, obviously, when you want to ink up a pen. So to me, that's like the practical while you're swatching the ink kind of thing. But then the other reason is just to play with the ink, right? Like we often do very big swatches or, drop down more ink for a swatch because we are just playing with the ink. We want to see the properties. And that is sort of like a different purpose in my mind. And sometimes you want to see like different inks sort of swatch like side by side. And that is fun too. And of course, you can even mix them. Um, I do realize, by the way, that maybe I'm putting too much ink on the page when I make a swatch because the super concentrated, like, pool of ink is probably not something that would, like, naturally come out of a fountain pen nib when you're using the ink. So I'm not sure if I'm being wasteful. Um, Although I guess in the end it's fine if I like it because I can do whatever I want. But I do like seeing the variation in the swatches, like where you get very light parts and very dark parts. That's why I was trying to make like those circle swatches because I feel like you see more rather than like when I mean, obviously you can just ink up a pen and like, you know, draw out a box if you just wanted to see how the ink looked like coming out from a fountain pen. Yeah, so I feel like sometimes you see really beautiful swatches in videos or online, but then when you actually use that ink to write with, especially if you use like finer nibs, then everything starts to like blur together and they look similar. So a lot of inks they could be like grouped together and just be like really dark, so you're not going to see like all the color variations, which is sort of sad because why do you know get these fancy inks if you can't see all the beautiful variations? So I think that is why I definitely have been just pushed to use larger nib sizes lately because I used to be more in the extra fine like nib sizes, and now it's definitely like medium or up because I want to see the inks better. I write larger, and usually this is because it's like fun time journaling and places where there's plenty of space, so it doesn't matter if I'm like writing larger or taking up more space so that I can see the inks better. Whereas in functional kind of like planning, um I feel almost like fountain pens are almost like not necessary, or it just gets to be boring. I could just as well use a gel pen and just use black ink and be done with it, instead of having to like wrestle with good paper or how certain inks might perform badly, um, in your planner, or if it might feather, like just all these issues. Like, ugh, if it's for functional purposes, then I could just use a gel pen and be done with it. But when it comes to fountain pens and all the different inks and all the interesting stuff, it's really more for like fun, for experimentation, and also like my morning pages or my like brain dump kind of writing, I do that in like a Rhodia notepad or what do you call those? Clairefontaine notebooks and things like that because they are not things that I would keep forever. So I can write big and can take up many pages. And so that is sort of like fun to be able to use all the ink colors and switch around and just play around. And I know it might seem sort of wasteful because if it's stuff that you're not going to keep, like why are we using all these fancy tools and fancy inks? But it's fun. Like the process is what it's about. So I definitely think it's worth it. So it's interesting how, with just a few months of experimentation, I already have so many like opinions, about inks and how I want to use them and how I am using them differently already. But feel free to offer your feedback down in the comments because I'm totally open to being schooled. I'm obviously no expert, and all my feelings are just my feelings from playing around and experimenting and hopefully learning more about what I like and don't like. I suppose we will always have our own personal likes and dislikes and also ways of doing things. Like, there probably is no right or wrong. I think it's okay. It's probably what makes this hobby so cool, is that everyone gets their own unique experience, which again goes back to the idea of how cool samples are because you really just have to try it yourself. Someone can try to like explain to you about an ink, or that maybe you'll love it, blah, 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 but you just have to try it to get your own unique experience. Um, by the way, if you see me sometimes swatching onto separate note cards, it's because I also have separate watercolor paper cards that I swatch because I use them as reference. Because I try to order them by color family, and that way I can see them side by side, and it helps me to decide like what inks I really want to use. So I'm already starting to doubt though the way that I'm swatching everything, like if the cards are the best way, because I sort of add some water on the right hand side to see the effect of what happens if you add water, if I want to use the ink in a painting perhaps. But yeah, it's all new territory for me. So I don't know. I find myself going down one path and then it's like, no, wait, I just realized something. And now I feel like I need to re-swatch everything so that everything is uniform. You know what I mean? Um, in the beginning, it's like you don't have your system down pat. So, like, every time something needs to change, I don't know. I feel like I have to redo everything. So it's sort of annoying. But of course, I don't have that many inks compared to, someone else that has been doing this for years and years. So it probably doesn't take as much work anyways, even if I did want to re-swatch everything. But of course, with the samples, that's a whole other issue because there's not that much ink in a sample. So if you keep like swatching, you're just gonna have no more ink to use, which would defeat the purpose. But let me know if you have a preferred way or method of swatching inks. I'd be interested to know what people do and what people use as a reference. And if they swatch in like different places for different purposes, that would be interesting, definitely to know. But as I finish swatching everything, once they're dried, I'm going to go through all the inks. Okay, so now that everything's dry, I'm going to go back and talk through the inks that I have swatched. So this brand, Inkebara, they are handmade inks made in the Czech Republic. And the thing that's cool about them is that they are water-based inks that are non-toxic, meaning they don't use any solvents, oils, or alcohols. And I did not know about this brand at all, but I definitely want to explore, different ink brands and not just like the super famous popular ones that you always hear about. And so I picked a couple of the brown inks that were available and got those. So you can see I have swatched brown pink, caramel, earth, and sand. And they are definitely all brown inks to me, but definitely also very different. So the brown pink, I thought that it would actually have more pink in it, but to me it just seems very brown. To me, it sort of like tends more towards like the darker gray or black side of like brown, whereas the caramel definitely has like that yellowish tone, almost like curry kind of thing. And then earth is the one that actually looks like it has more pink properties to me, and then sand is sort of like in the middle because it definitely tends more towards like the yellow side of things, but it's not as, yellow as the caramel. It definitely is in just sort of that brown, but tending towards like, that orangey yellowy side of things. So I think there's a nice like variation here. So I definitely have to try all of these and see which one in writing, I would actually like more. Just with my first impressions, I really like Earth, but I am afraid that it might be too light, so I definitely have to check that one out more. Next, I have swatched Baroque Charleston, Pannonia Treehouse, and Ferris Wheel Press Oyster Hour. And they're sort of like, browns, but definitely very different because the Baroque looks almost like red orange, right? And the Pannonia seems the most like sort of generic brown. And Ferris Wheel Press definitely looks very light, and I'm sure many people already know about this ink, but I had never tried it, so that's why I wanted to get the sample. Moving on, I also tried Private Reserve Sepia and Octopus Bronze, as well as Octopus Colibri. Although the Colibri is like a write and draw ink, and I realized that it is much more like thick and um, sticky almost. So obviously, it is a different like line of inks that they make. So maybe that is not good for fountain pens. So if you know more about that, definitely let me know because I don't want to, mess up the fountain pens, but it seems like it's like a different type of ink. Finally, I got a sample of the Roller and Cleaner Jewel, which is also a sketch ink, just because I had room and so I threw it in my cart. And I do like purples, but again, it is a sketch ink, so it's supposed to be like permanent. So I don't know if I want to put it into any like nice pens, but I do have a lot of like my Fude sketch kind of cheapy fountain pens, so I can definitely use it in that. And again, I just like purple, so I sort of threw that one in to try it out. And I just realized I'm not really like maybe describing the inks very well because I am a beginner. But in this next page, you can see that they definitely have a theme going with. It's like Diatramentus Annie Oakley, Sailor Moroccan Mint Tea, and Diamine Golden Sands. So these are definitely sort of like greenish yellowish. And so I guess they're technically not brown, but was interested in these colors. So I wanted to see them like compared side by side. And generally, I just sort of like these like muddy-ish kind of colors, if you can say that, instead of being like super bright, toned inks. I like these muddy colors. So definitely just more inks for me to explore and learn about as I use them for writing. And here I have Ferris Wheel Press Goose Poupon, which is, I guess, similar to the previous page type of inks. And I don't have it, so I just wanted to try it. And Sailor Ink 280, I don't know if my swatch just sort of turned out really dark, but that is sort of like another dirty, kind of greenish, brownish ink. And then the Pannonia Lichen is obviously green, and I had room in my cart. That's why I threw it in there just to give it a try. So those are all the inks that I have swatched this time around. I hope you enjoyed just taking a peek at them, and obviously you can go back and take a closer look at the swatches in detail because I'm probably not the best person to like describe exactly how they are, but they are all slightly different, and the more you like look at it like an ink, the more you notice. So that's why I really like the samples to be able to like fill up a pen and actually write like pages and pages. And I realize that it's something that I really like doing and is helpful for me because I do write so many like morning pages, like brainstorming type of journaling, that I can see the ink like on a whole page, written out in the variations if there is any like shading. And yeah, so giving myself time, it really helps me to understand like if I really like that ink, and would use it, in the long term. But even if this doesn't necessarily result in like buying a bottle, I do like this idea of just buying different samples and you can sort of like rotate and just go through like a bunch of inks. It's definitely very, very fun. So, thank you so much for joining me on this fountain pen chit chat and like brownish ink swatching session. Uh, Thanks so much for watching. I very much appreciate it. And of course, I hope you have a very lovely day. And until next time, bye.